Okay. Good evening, everyone. And again, lovely to see all of you. Thank you for coming today, joining. As Eloise just mentioned, this is the end of the last class for this year. And so planning to be back by end of May next year and start beginning of the June. That is so since we will not be able to finish this particular text which we started, the Song of the Spiritual Experience. So we'll continue when I come back. Okay, so again, as usual, I would like to start with a short breathing, mindful breathing meditation exercise. Watching your breath mindfully so that we can bring our mind in the moment, in present. Then we can try to cultivate good intention, motivation for being here. We can think, us coming here together, gathering here together, giving our precious time, effort to listen and to engage in discussion and reflect, contemplate on what we have heard. May all of this become cause and conditions to transform our mind. So that we can minimize, reduce, and destroy those harmful negative thoughts, emotions, feelings. and to cultivate and improve and increase those helpful, positive thoughts, emotions, feelings, such as true love, compassion, bodhicitta mind, wisdom, tolerance, moral discipline, and so forth. Which are the source of our own happiness and happiness of others. And may it be cause and conditions to achieve our own highest potential, the fully awakened state. So that we can fulfill the highest purpose of others and oneself. May we always be helpful and beneficial to all sentient beings, directly, indirectly, through our three doors, body, speech, and mind. May we never hurt and harm others, directly, indirectly, especially intentionally, through any of our doors, body, speech, and mind. Okay.
On page 73 in your prayer book, we'll start with the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. And we'll do that 3 times in English. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent
destroyer, the one God will, the fourth destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Father, Lord of the world, supreme light of human beings, retain, teacher of the power of human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed and standard destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subdue from the shelter plane. I prostrate, make offering, and go for refuge. To the one endowed and standard destroyer, the one God here, the fourth destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, so that the knowledge of the world, to him guides of human beings to be tamed, teacher of God and human beings, to you, the complete and fully awakened one, the endowed and standard destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subdue from the shelter plane. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for that.
To the founder,
The endowed and standard destroyer, the one born again, the fourth destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, so that the Lord of the world, supreme God that may be to be tamed, leader of God and human beings, to you the complete and fully awakened one, the endowed and standard destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subdue from the sacred plane. I prostrate, make offerings, go for refuge.
and on page 97, we'll do the short mandala offering once in Tibetan. Sashi Moki.
Beto Tare Rale
And then we'll do the refuge and bodhicitta before the teaching, once in English and twice in Tibetan. I go for refuge
Until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye Chödan Choki Chonam La Chanchu Pato Dane Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chöje Gibe Sonam Gi Rola Penje Sangye Dubasho Sangye Chödan Choki Chonam La Chanchu Pato Dane Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chöje Gibe Sonam Gi Rola Penche Sangye Dupasho. So so last week we discussed about the practice of middle scope, that is understanding, as long as we're in samsara, we are never free from the problem and sufferings. As long as our life or rebirth or existence is driven by the contaminated karma and delusions, we will always find some problems, some sufferings all the times, and therefore, in order to free from the all the problem, all the sufferings, not only temporarily but permanently, then we need to, achieve the liberation or nirvana, that is freedom from the samsara and the suffering of the samsara. And in order to achieve that freedom or nirvana, the path that lead to that nirvana is, the eightfold path, or to the higher training, the higher training of wisdom, the higher training of material concentrations, and higher training of, moral discipline. And through the practice of those three training, moral discipline, meditate concentration, and the wisdom, then one can destroy the very root of all the delusions, the fundamental ignorance. And when you destroy that fundamental ignorance, then there's no more delusion arising due to that ignorance. And when there is no more delusion arising, then there is no more creating of, contaminated karma. And when there is no more creation of contaminated karma, then there is no more rebirth in the samsara. And when there is no more rebirth in the samsara, then there is no more sufferings due to the samsara rebirth. And then, so that was the practice that we discussed last week. So even we practice the three higher training, and to be able to free ourselves from the samsara and the suffering of samsara permanently, and to be able to achieve, true lasting happiness of nirvana or liberations, even we are able to achieve that, but even we are not suffering, if the sentient beings around us are suffering, how can we be happy and satisfied with that when everyone's around us is suffering? And therefore, we need to cultivate, sense of concern, loving kindness, compassion, sense of responsibility to help other sentient beings that is surrounding us to free from their sufferings, their problem and cause of their suffering and that. And so that is then engage in the practice of the bodhisattvas, the supreme or great scope, the practice of that. So I think so now in terms of the sections, now we come to that sections, the practice of high scope or the bodhisattva practice, and within that practice of the bodhisattva practice, first generating the bodhicitta mind, bodhicitta mind, can be translated in English in different translation, the mind of enlightenment, the mind of awakening, literal translations. Bodhi means the awakening or enlightenment. Citta is the mind, so the mind of and it is the state of mind that wish to achieve the fully enlightened state or fully awakened state in order to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering and cause of sufferings, driven by great compassions. That mind is called the bodhicitta mind. Driven by great compassions, due to that great compassion, driven by that great compassion, then you generate a strong wish to help to free all sentient beings from their suffering, cause of suffering. In order to do that, then you feel your wish to achieve your own highest potential. That's your own fully awakened state. And that mind is what is described as a bodhicitta mind. So first training in cultivating the bodhicitta mind. And once you cultivate that bodhicitta mind, then motivated by that bodhicitta mind, then you engage into other bodhisattva practices, such as the practice of 6 perfections or 10 perfections, and the practice of gathering and helping the 4 means of gathering and helping the sentient beings. So those are the bodhisattva practice. So that all these practice come in these sections, part of the bodhisattva practice or high scope practice. Maybe we can. So in terms of the verse where we are, I think we finished verse number 20 and we are in verse number 21, and in terms of verse number 21, so, 21 and 22 go together, and so 21 and 22 together, it is about cultivating the bodhicitta mind, the importance of cultivating the bodhicitta mind, So generating the mind. So here, generating the mind here is meaning the bodhicitta mind, okay? Generating the bodhicitta mind, or the mind of awakening, is the central axle is like the life force, is the very life force, of the supreme vehicle path. The supreme vehicle path, or as I mentioned before, high scope practice or the path. So the bodhicitta mind is like the life force of that practice or that path, the Bodhisattva path. Is the life force, most crucial, most important. What makes someone Bodhisattva? What makes someone Bodhisattvas is whether someone has that bodhicitta mind or not. It's not based on how you look it. It's not based on external appearance. Neither is based on wisdom. Neither is based on your practice of moral discipline, or neither is based on how good your concentration is. What makes someone bodhisattva is whether you have that bodhicitta mind or not. If you have bodhicitta mind, even your concentration is not so good, even if you don't have the wisdom, still you are bodhisattva. Okay. If you don't have that bodhicitta mind, you might have the wisdom realizing even emptiness. You might be very smart. You might have very strong practice of concentration, moral discipline, but still you are not a bodhisattva. And so therefore, the bodhicitta is the life force of the bodhisattva's practice, bodhisattva path. And so it is the foundations and the support of all expansive deeds, the bodhisattva extensive deeds, incredible bodhisattva practice or the deeds. The bodhicitta mind is the very foundation and the support of all this incredible practice or deeds of bodhisattvas. What makes the bodhisattvas without any hesitation to be able to sacrifice their life without two-minded when it is needed, when it is beneficial to someone else, is their bodhicitta mind. It's because that bodhicitta mind. What makes the bodhisattvas to be able to dedicate their life to the service of other sentient beings, hold their life 24 hours. What makes them is because of that the bodhicitta mind. Bodhicitta mind is that give them that support, the energy, the determinations, the confidence, the strength. For us, sometimes we want to be service to others, we want to help others, but then, after some time, we give up. We feel it's not for, because our energy runs down. We become tired because we don't have the bodhicitta mind that keep us alive and continue to give, continue to be service, continue to help, and so it is that bodhicitta mind that is the very foundation, the support, the basis, the cause for incredible bodhisattvas deeds and practice. Some of the bodhisattva deeds and practice, sometimes when you hear, is beyond our mind. It's like how we feel, how can they do that? How are they able to do that? We cannot, our mind cannot conceive and grasp fully, because it is something beyond our deeds and our way of seeing things. And the reason why they are able to engage into such a expansive great deeds is because of that bodhicitta mind. So that is why. To all instance of true accumulations is like the elixir of gold, Two collections, the collection of wisdom and the collection of the merit. Those are the two collections. So the bodhicitta mind, is elixir that can transform ordinary metal into the gold. Just like with the elixir that they can transform ordinary metal into gold. Similarly, when you have Bodhicitta mind, that can transform our ordinary activities into virtues. That can transform our ordinary actions or deeds into a spiritual practice. That can transform the Bodhicitta mind, can transform our ordinary activities as a cause of creating or gathering two accumulations, the accumulation method, and so therefore, for example, when we eat now, eating is very ordinary activities. You go to bathroom because your body needs to go, that's just ordinary at the moment. We try to clean our house because we want to keep it clean, because we want to not get sick and all of that. It is just ordinary activities, But if you do all of that out of Bodhicitta mind, out of Bodhicitta motivation, because of that, then all of those activities can become virtues. All of those activities can become virtues, can be transformed into virtues. All of those activities can become a Dharma practice, spiritual practice. All of them, those activities can become a cause of enlightenment. All of those activities become a practice to accumulate the merit and to gather, to accumulate the wisdoms, and they can all be through the power of the Bodhicitta mind. So the Bodhicitta mind is something that can transform our ordinary action, deeds, activities into something virtuous, something into a cause of enlightenment. It is a treasury of merit containing the merit collection of virtues, So it's like a mining of the virtues, mines of the virtues, from where you can continue to mine, So from that Bodhicitta mind, we can inexhaustibly continue to create so much virtue, so much merit. It's like the treasure of the virtue, treasure of the merit. It's the mine of the virtues. As some of the Gautama master says, also Shantideva said, and Gautama master says, when you have that Bodhicitta mind, when you try to give something, whether it says small amount of water to the birds or any animals, or when you try to feed them with whatever little seed, or even one handful of grain to one animals, one insect, one bird, when you do that without a Bodhicitta motivation, with the Bodhicitta mind, that act become Bodhisattva's practice, Bodhisattva act, Bodhisattva deeds. That acts, with that one act, you create as equal number of virtues or merit as feeding countless sentient beings. Even though in action you are just feeding one sentient being, one bird, for example. But because of your motivation of Bodhicitta, while you are feeding one sentient being, but you feed that for the benefit of each and every sentient being. For the benefit of each and every sentient being, so you create equal number of merit or virtues as equal of that sentient beings. And so therefore, with that one act, you recreate equal numbers of virtues or merit as you are feeding countless sentient beings. And so there is like this treasure. From one virtues, you create billions of virtues and merit by the power of that Bodhicitta mind. If you don't have Bodhicitta mind, if it is not out of that Bodhicitta mind, if you are just thinking of just one sentient being, that one bird, then you feed one bird and you get benefit of feeding one bird, helping one bird. That's all you get. Do you get it? You create virtues, you create merit of helping one bird, feeding one bird. That is all you get. But when you have the motivation, even though in action you are just feeding one, but your Bodhicitta mind to be benefit with this act, to be benefit for each and every sentient beings, then their virtues is multiply as equal number of sentient beings. And so therefore, as Kadamba Master says, the Bodhicitta mind is the most powerful practice to create incredible amount of virtues and merit. It's like, it's like putting one drop of water into the oceans. One drop of the water, if it drops on a warm, hot rock, it dries immediately. It's gone. On other hand, same one drop of that water, if you drop in the oceans, it will remain there. Part of that will remain there as long as the ocean is there. And similarly, that is how it is when you have that Bodhicitta mind, your virtues become that equal of all sentient beings. And so therefore it's incredibly powerful way of accumulating merit quickly and very powerful. And also is very powerful practice for purifications, And therefore, the earlier Kadamba master, they used to say, if you want to purify, practice Bodhicitta mind. If you need to accumulate merit and virtues, practice Bodhicitta mind. Practicing the Bodhicitta mind can act both of them as powerful purification, as a powerful tools to accumulate merit, for both. It's such a powerful practice. And as, Shantideva said, of course, Buddha and then Shantideva, the Kadamba masters, His Holiness always, Lama Sovarum teaches, as they always says, if you want to help benefit yourself, practice Bodhicitta mind. If you want to help benefit others, practice Bodhicitta mind. Bodhicitta mind is that really benefit. That Bodhicitta mind is the source for you to be benefit to others. So it is, if you want to help and benefit others, you need to develop that Bodhicitta mind. If you have Bodhicitta mind, we cannot stop from helping others. Nothing can stop you from being helpful and benefit to others. Because that mind is like a magnet that draws the metals, automatically. And same way when you're that Bodhicitta mind, it's just it's just poor, your help to be benefit. You cannot just watch someone suffering and not help when you can, So therefore, that is the kind of the source, that make us to be help and benefit to others. Also, when you have that bodhicitta mind, is the best help benefit you can do for yourself as well. And Lama Tsongkhapa, he said, even though when we develop bodhicitta mind, even though our intention, motivation is to help and benefit others, even though our intention not to help ourselves, benefit ourselves, our intention to be help and benefit to others when you have bodhicitta mind. But by product, it helps and benefit yourself more than anyone else. By product of that. And so sometimes His Holiness Dalai Lama may kind of, in a humorous way and seriously, if you want to be selfish, be wisely selfish. And being wisely selfish is practicing the bodhicitta mind. Because by practicing bodhicitta mind, it helps you, it benefits you, So it benefits and help others, it benefits and help yourself. If you want to, experience temporary happiness and ultimate happiness, practice the bodhicitta mind. When you have bodhicitta mind, immediately, it gives you inner strength, self-confidence, inner peace. So it gives you temporarily, immediately, you have those benefits and make you, all of that. And then ultimately it leads to fully enlightenment, fully awakening. And when you achieve fully awakens, that is the ultimate happiness. So therefore, if there is anything, any practice that can be helpful now in the futures and ultimate happiness, then is the bodhicitta mind. Short-term benefit, long-term benefit, it has all of that. Many other things, sometimes we have short-term benefit, but it hurts long-term. Sometimes maybe it has benefit long-term, maybe in short-term, maybe we might not get benefit in many of activities, policies, actions. But the bodhicitta mind is a practice that leads and gives you temporary happiness as well as ultimate happiness. Immediate happiness and long-term ultimate happiness. And so therefore, that is what, as one of the great master, Punulama Rinpoche, great bodhisattva, whose main practice of bodhicitta throughout his life, main focus of his practice of bodhicitta mind. And as he writes, with his own experience, when you are lazy, practice bodhicitta mind. That will make you, overcome the laziness. It's like, you feel lazy and then you see your most beloved child who needs help. You will not be lazy. You will immediately get up and try to help that person. How can you just be lazy and when you see the pain and suffering of your most beloved child? There's no space to be lazy. And, and so that's how that bodhicitta minds, you see also. So there's no time to be, there's no space to be lazy when you have that Bodhicitta mind, So when your mind is kind of, when your mind is depressed, down, practice Bodhicitta, it uplift, it gives you inner strength, self-confidence. And as his own Dalai Lama said, with his own experience, the Bodhicitta mind, the compassion is what that, he has been asked, so many times, how he's able to keep himself so cheerful, so positive, hopeful, and without being overwhelmed by the problem and suffering and the pain that he experienced himself, that he saw the Tibetan people experiencing that around him, that the world is experiencing at the moment, or has been experiencing, despite all of that he can, how doesn't he become kind of, keep up or feel low your mind and kind of, bitter and frustrations and, depressed, all of that. It's his compassion and Bodhicitta mind that help him to overcome all of that. And so again, this is the Bodhicitta mind is something that can be incredibly powerful to help individuals to overcome all those feelings and not to knock you down, and as His Holiness always mentions, when you think of Bodhicitta mind, when you practice Bodhicitta mind, you are constantly thinking of not just the suffering or well-being of yourself, your family, your friends, not just the well-being of the humanity, all the human beings, not just thinking about well-being of all human and animals. You are thinking about the well-being and happiness of all sentient beings, seen and unseen, all sentient beings. And when you practice the Bodhicitta mind, you make that kind of commitment to work for the benefit of all these sentient beings. Not just one sentient, all those sentient beings. You train your mind. To be courageous, to develop that kind of inner confidence and courage to work for the benefit of all sentient beings in that way. And not only just for one lifetime or after, you train your mind that the willingness to work for the benefit of others, even it takes eons and eons. When you train your mind in that way, then you see, the suffering of some sentient beings compared to what we have prepared it feels lighter, and that it doesn't overwhelm you. When you have prepared yourself to work for eons and eons, if you have to work for one lifetime, it's very short. It's nothing for what you have trained, and so that is what makes someone so not being able to kind of knock down by those and overwhelmed by those sufferings when you see it, and that is what the inner strength, the Bodhicitta gives you, that kind of inner strength and confidence and courage, and so that is what His Holiness, and as you see, he says he always practice is recite and practice, the prayer from the Shantidevas, and as long as space remains, as long as the sentient beings remain, may I too remain to dispel the sufferings or miseries of all sentient beings. And that is what you train. That is what Bodhisattvas train. And when you train that, then, even you have to work all your life for the benefit of others. When you have committed and you are trained for eons in eons, this one lifetime is very small. And when you have dedicated and train your mind to work for the benefit, for the happiness, to relieve the suffering of countless sentient beings, when you see the suffering of human beings, it's relatively small for when you think of all sentient beings. Do you get it? In terms of numbers, when you are dedicated to work to relieve or release the suffering of all sentient beings, even when you think all the suffering of human beings, it is still very small numbers. And so then you feel, yes, there's sufferings, but relatively, it doesn't become so overwhelmed because you are prepared for this much of suffering, and this suffering is this much. It's much more lighter. You can handle it in that way, So, so that is yeah. So when you are depressed, practice bodhicitta mind that uplift you, give you inner strength, and confidence. When you are lazy, practice bodhicitta mind, that kind of drive you. And so through so that is the and that is in verse number so verse number 22, recognizing those truths, so as it has mentioned in verse number 20, we just discussed, recognizing all of that, all this, the heroic bodhisattvas, uphold the precious supreme mind. So precious supreme mind is the bodhicitta mind. It's so precious. It's so precious. It's a supreme mind because it doesn't only think of happiness of one individual. It doesn't think of only the happiness of few individuals, our friends, our families. It goes beyond that. It doesn't only think of happiness of our species, humanity. It goes beyond that. It not only think of just humanity and animals that live in the planet. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. All sentient beings of six realms, seen, unseen, think of each and every sentient being's well-being and happiness. So there can't be any more supreme mind than that. There can't be any more supreme attitude than that. And it is that mind is extremely precious because that is the source. That mind is the source of, as I mentioned before, happiness of oneself and all sentient beings, temporary happiness, ultimate happiness. Is the cause of fully awakening or fully enlightened state. And so therefore, there's nothing more precious than that. And so therefore, uphold that precious supreme mind as the heart of their practice. So bodhisattvas, their heart practice, the main practice, the heart practice is that bodhicitta mind, the practice of bodhicitta. That is the hard practice. That is what distinguishes the bodhisattvas from other practitioners. When it comes to practice of moral discipline, then it's a common practice of bodhisattva and non-bodhisattvas practitioner who are on the path to individual liberation or arhat. When it comes to the practice of meditative concentration, is the common practice, common path. When it comes to the wisdom, it is a common path, common practice, but uncommon, unique practice that make bodhisattvas stand out is that bodhicitta mind, that precious supreme bodhicitta mind. Is that make the bodhisattvas stand out from other practitioners and from other, that make them unique, that make them, stand out. And so therefore, that is the hard practice. That is, and since we, even though we try to follow the bodhisattva path, at least we have the inclination, we have the interest in that path, then the bodhicitta mind should be also kind of the hard practice. Of course, there are many practices we try to apply, we try to integrate as much as possible, but the bodhicitta mind should be the central practice, is essence, the essence of all practice should be the very hard practice for us as well, and focus more on that, even in this world, I think, in our times, throughout the history and even especially in our times, what is really needed is true love, compassion, bodhicitta mind in this world. That is what's missing. People are getting more educated, but we are having more problems. Instead of having less problems, we are having more problems. Physically, maybe we might be having less problems because of the advancement in technology. There are better treatment, better cure, better medicines. So we are having more healthy, more longer life. But apart from that, people are becoming more unhappy. People are becoming more unhappy. There's less and less, there's more and more kind of distance among human beings. And because there's lack of true love, compassion, bodhicitta mind, and again, I used to think, I myself, like many people, I think, like I showed many people, I used to think the world as there's more access for the education, modern educations for more and more peoples in the world. Our world is going to be better. People are going to be more wise, and people are going to, so we will have less problems. But it's sad to see that is not happening. Instead, feel like it's going the other directions. It feels like that is going the other directions. People are becoming more kind of easily angry, less tolerance, taking advantage of others more, all of that. So So what I have realized personally is, what I have believed was kind of naive and mistaken, or not. And more I come to understanding the needs of educations of love, compassion, both. That is the key, to change the society so that there is more tolerance, so there is more harmonious, so there is more peace, so there is more trying to help each others, benefit each others. And what we really need is love, compassion, both in the mind, and that is what is lacking. And that is why, that is going other directions, the opposite direction. And so understanding more, even more, coming to more understand the importance of cultivating love and compassion both in the mind, is so crucial on individual level, for the family, for the neighborhood, for the state, for the country, for the world, even just in my village, way back, even when I was as a young boy, child, there wasn't modern education there. We had no school there, My brother couldn't go to school in the village. There was no school there, he didn't get. My father has to send him to the, private school in Kathmandu. That is the only way he could get education at that time. I was sent to the monastery. That was the only way I could get the educations, and that was same. My parents didn't have educations. My parents didn't know how to read, write. My father can read not well enough, a little bit of Tibetans. He cannot write, even he cannot read very well, and of course our grandparents, but still there is, there's sense of humanity, there's sense of oneness, more oneness, helping each others. When someone's having a problem in the village, where everyone's come together to be helped, whether you are related or not related, directly or indirectly, there's a sense of coming together to help each others and all of that. There's a sense of community, there's a sense of compassion, there's a sense of caring, But now, younger generation, they are getting all the education, modern education. They have, degrees, all this undergraduate, graduate, all these degrees, but losing that part, and so that is sad, but and so before the older generation in my village and many parts of the other places, they devoted towards these educations, the education on cultivating the mind, the heart. That was what they dedicated. Even though they might not have the modern education, but they were very put that into practice, and that was the education they got. But now I think we are losing that, and I think that is, and so that becomes the cause of problems on individual and within the families and within the neighborhood, state, countries. I think that is where it is. So continue to verse number 22. I, Yogi, so here Lamsong Khapa, saying, have practiced in this manner. You, so telling us, kind of giving advice and instruction to us, you who aspire for liberations, who aspire for, non-abiding liberation, that fully enlightenment, who should do likewise. And so he advised we should also focus and give effort and make the bodhicitta practice as the heart practice, as the heart practice. Even among some of my teachers, I've seen, some teachers, who might not be, very eloquent in terms of teachings, because of, because of how much extensive studies they have done or not done, some of them more extensive studies than others, but even though they might not have as much knowledge in many matters or many subjects compared to some other teachers, and in terms of presenting, they might not be as eloquent as others. They might not be as charismatic like some other teachers, but they have reached so many sentient beings, touched so many sentient beings' mind, and benefit so many sentient beings. The only way they did that is their bodhicitta mind, because people can feel their sincerely their bodhicitta mind, whether they are charismatic or not, whether they are very knowledgeable in every subject or not, but they can feel the love, the compassions, their dedications towards the well-being and of other sentient beings, their bodhicitta mind. And because of that, they are able to touch so many people's minds, life, and transform so many sentient beings' life in a positive way, and that is the power of the bodhicitta mind. That is the power of the bodhicitta mind. Sometimes we see certain teachers, or individuals who are very educated, who has a lot of knowledge, who can, and very eloquent when they explain things, the way they explain, the way they, and charismatic as well, but they don't necessarily always touch people's heart and able to transform their heart. When you hear it, it's nice, it's good, it's a pleasant, you like to hear it, you like to read it, it's a nice, but in terms of touching your heart, sometimes it doesn't touch your heart, it doesn't transform your heart, and that is, I think, the power of the bodhicitta is so powerful that and that is why, in Mahayana teachings and the practice, of course, Tibetan Buddhism is based on Mahayana teachings, Mahayana practice. And so therefore, in those teaching and practice, the emphasis is so much on bodhicitta mind, they emphasize so much on bodhicitta mind. You know, if we don't have the love, compassion, the bodhicitta mind, even we might have, the knowledge, the wisdom to solve the problems of solve the problem of the world, solve the problem of individuals. Even we might have the resource to do that. Even we might have plenty of resources. Even though we might have the wisdom and knowledge to solve, we will not do that. We will not help. We will not solve the problem because we don't care. And because we don't have the love, compassion, concern, care for those beings, On the other hand, if you have true sense of love, compassion, bodhicitta, and when you have sense of true affections, concern of someone's, even you might not have the wisdom, even you might not have the skills, even you might not have the resource, you will try to find a way to do that. You will find a way to find a resource. Even you don't have resource yourself, you will try to find a resource to be able to help them. Even you might not have the wisdom and knowledge to solve the problem, you will try to find someone who can have that knowledge, who can, so that we can, and through that we can be able to help benefit that. That is what really is, it all boils down. When you analyze, when you look around ourselves in our own personal life and around ourselves in the world, when you look around, when you analyze, at the end, it all boils down to that. It all boils down to that. Why is there so much violence? Why is there so much violence? Despite improvement in economy in general, why is there so many people in the world who are still starving, who doesn't still have, access to education, access to health, access to basic like clean drinking waters and so forth. It shouldn't be there, but it is, in reality, there is. Because there's not enough love and compassion. Because those who have resources to help, they're unwilling to help. Those who have resources, they are unwilling to share. Why they do not want to share? Why they do not want to help? Because there's not enough strong love, compassion, sense of care, concern, affection to others. Those, So as long as we don't have that kind of, as long as human beings do not develop such love, compassion, bodhicitta mind, GDP, whatever that is, might go up, from 5% to 20%, 50%, still we will have all these problems. Continuity, there will be a lot of people who still have that problems, because those who have a lot will not be willing to share, not being willing to help. On the other hand, if we have true love, compassion, bodhicitta mind, sense of concern, care, even if we have very little, we will be willing to share, willing to help, willing to, and thereby to solve many of the relieve the sufferings, many of the suffering that we see in the world, and and when we are able to help, not only we out of that such love and compassion and both the mind, when we are able to help someone and reduce their suffering and pain, not only to help them, and when we see that you have been able to contribute in reducing someone's pain, someone's suffering, it gives you immense happiness, satisfactions. It gives you immense happiness that you are able to contribute, that you are able to be some help, small help, benefit in reducing someone's suffering, someone's pain. That kind of the joy and happiness you cannot buy. That kind of joy and happiness you cannot buy with your money. That kind of joy and happiness you cannot experience with sense pleasure. It's something beyond all of that. And so again, it helps others. It gives you immense kind of joy in yourself to be able to be helped. And your act can inspire others to do that, just like when you hear stories, when you read, when you hear stories of someone's contributions, dedications, of helping someone, benefiting, inspire you, that you feel like, oh, I should also do something. You feel like, yeah, I must do something more. I should be able to do something. It just as it gives us inspirations to give us wanting to do more, feel like that I should also do something, same as when we do that, it can inspire maybe your friends, your children, your family members, and others, and that is how that we can contribute in the bigger pictures towards that. And also, of course, we also need the wisdom, the method. The Bodhicitta mind is the part of the method. They both are equally important. But in order to have a, correct realizations of the wisdom, realizing the ultimate truth or emptiness, it requires a lot of merit, And so when we cultivate the Bodhicitta mind, we create a lot of merit. And through that creation, a lot of merit, then it becomes more easy to understand the emptiness correctly and have the realizations of emptiness easily. For those who find difficult to understand the emptiness, even when you try to study, and still you find difficulty, even just understanding of what that means and how to practice, meditate, how to integrate, and all of that, sometimes it's due to lack of merit. When you don't have enough merit, then there is some kind of obscurations, and due to that obscurations, due to lack of merit, then we find difficult understanding them fully. But when we create enough merit that open clear that obscurations, and then it makes much more easier to have the correct, unmistaken understanding and realizations. It's as Aryadeva, the main disciple of the Nagarjuna, in his 400 verses or stanzas, as he said, those who have a small merit or not strong, lot of merit, they wouldn't even have a doubt on emptiness. They wouldn't even hear the teaching on emptiness. Even just to hear on teaching on emptiness, you need a lot of merit. Forget about having correct understanding and realizations. Even just to be able to hear the teaching on emptiness, it requires a lot of merit. And so, therefore, the more merit you create, the more it open condition. It helps us to have better conditions, to have better understanding and realizations. And through that, again, how that Bodhicitta mind can support, help to have the wisdom, indirectly in that way, how that can support and help to have that the wisdom, to have a realization wisdom. And in order to have that bodhicitta mind, of course, then, we need to practice, meditate, contemplate, And then in order to contemplate, meditate, practice correctly, then by following the correct method of the practice, meditations, contemplations, then we need to study, and not only study, then try to apply, integrate that what we have studied into the practice, into contemplation and meditations, and through that, then we try to have that bodhicitta mind at the very beginning, with the effort. It requires effort. And slowly, as our practice gets better and better, as we make more and more improvement in our practice meditations, then it requires less and less effort. And slowly, you started to feel that bodhicitta mind, love, compassion, bodhicitta mind, more and more frequent, more and more easily, with a less effort. And then eventually you will have that, the bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta mind, spontaneous, effortlessly, spontaneously, effortlessly, without having to meditate. It just arises naturally. And when you have that, that is when we have the bodhicitta realizations, and that is when you become the bodhisattvas. You enter the bodhisattva path, you become bodhisattvas. When we have that spontaneous, natural, effortless day and night. When you see any sentient beings, their suffering, pains, you don't have to meditate, it just arises. Whether someone has been nice to you or someone has been nasty to you, the moment you see their suffering, their pain, your love, compassion, bodhicitta arises. You don't have to meditate, at the moment, we have problem with certain individuals. Even after meditating, you have so much resistance, to feel compassion, love for them. Maybe when see their pain, maybe instead of feeling compassion, we might feel good, feeling, oh, they should have, they deserve that. Do you get it what I mean? Feeling, that's what they needed. And we might even use term like, karma, karma coming back, Instead of compassion, we take joy in the pain and suffering and of someone else. But when you have that bodhicitta mind, whether that person has been very kind, compassionate, caring, or whether that person has been mean, cruel, or whether that person has been neither cruel, mean, or neither good, regardless of all of that, how they respond to you, how they reacted to you, what they have done, what they have not done, regardless of that, whenever you see suffering and pain of them, you feel compassion for them. You feel compassion for them. So, isn't that wonderful to be in that state, it is possible, when we have that bodhicitta mind, the realization bodhicitta mind is when it is generated and developed, then one can feel as it is described, for everyone's. And but like every practice, in order to reach a point where it becomes effortless, you have to start with effort. In the very beginning, it requires effort. Of course, we always like to reach the effortless state without putting any effort, because we don't want to put effort. But it doesn't happen like the way. We can have that wish, but, we have to put more effort, conscious effort at the very beginning, and to reach a point that where it becomes effortless and natural, and that's where it is. And then when it comes to the practice or the meditations on the bodhicitta, then there are quite a few different methods of meditation and practice that has been described in many of the scriptures, mainly, in classical teachings, scriptures, you find mainly kind of two different meditation or method, one is method called equalizing and exchanging self with others, and one is known as 7-point of cause and effect method. And then certain masters, teachers have tried to combine those two methods together. So there are quite a few different methods, and by applying any of the method, one can develop bodhicitta mind. For certain individual, one method might be more effective than other method, or some certain individual might be more able to connect more with one particular method than others. And so depending on what method works for one individual, and one try to focus on that particular meditation method and continue to practice until we generate that effortless bodhicitta mind. So of course, at this point, we don't have time to go through each of methods. So I think maybe we kind of continue next time, So yeah, Any questions? Any questions? Yes, please, Mary.
After retreat this weekend, will you be discussing some of the methods?
Yes, yes. Yes, so the retreat is going to be Bodhicitta retreat, and so there will be some teaching and some meditations practice, definitely there will be a little bit less time for meditations this time than normally we used to do, because normally we used to stay in place, and so we can practice from the morning, and then we don't have to go out for the meals, so there's a little more time. I think in the past when we did quite 4 or 5, sometimes 4 or 5 sessions of meditation in one day. Probably we wouldn't have that much sessions, but there will be explanations and then meditation practice. So following so definitely it will be there. Yeah. Any other questions? So then we do the.
So on page 97 in your prayer book, if you all would sing the short mandala offering very slowly, please. We will offer the closing mandala to Geshe.
Did you say 97?
Page 97, short mandala offering. Okay. It goes across here.
Okay. So
235, we'll do the general dedication prayers. The first and the second, once in Tibetan. Should we do the list? Yes. Yes. Okay.
We'll be dedicating for all sentient beings, but we have a list here of those with whom we have some sort of connection. So if you have anybody to add to the list, please just sing out their name. So for those suffering obstacles, we have Jana, Alyssa, and Vivian. Anybody has any others? For those suffering illness, Cleo Sher, Kelly, Tony, Randy R, Lisa C, Bodie the dog, John Bailey, Sujata, Stella, and the top twins.
And Diane and Nura, N-O-U-R-A.
I'm sorry.
Nura.
Okay. And those who died in the last 49 days. We have Brandy Davis, Shirley Reyes, Ari Jantel, Willie Wood, Julie Powell, and Geshe Tupton Silva. Myra. Myra? Yes, please.
Okay, on page 235, the first two general dedication prayers in Tibetan.
Lama Sangye Dumyone Do Chikyam Maleva Sala Ju sen cho ren bo che ma ke pa na ke ju chi ke wa nyam ba me pa yang kong le kong du ke wa shu.
On page 244, we'll do the short, long life prayers for our teachers. Starting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Big Ten. And for Lama Zopa Rinpoche.
Shin Chang Gan Jawe Ten Zin Jong Bewe Kun So To Po Tse Cho Song Ko We Le Mo Tu Tu Pa Da So Du Je Gun Du Sha Pen Sho.
And for our beloved teacher, Geshe Tupton Sherab. Beloved teacher, leading your students toward wisdom and compassion, explaining through exacting discernment the steps of the graduated path. You are the unequaled guide. Please live a long and stable life.
May our venerable Lama's lives be firm, their wide divine actions spread in the 10 directions, and the torch of Losang's teachings, dispelling the darkness of the 3 worlds beings, always remain. In all future lives, may we never be parted from the perfect Lamas and pure ways of the Dharma. May we gain every experience of path and stages, and quickly attain the stage of polar diamond knowledge.
Okay. So thank you very much, everyone who here and everyone who participated in the Zoom. So good to see Steve, Laura. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.